Hey everybody, this is Tim with the University of Vinyl, back with another video today, obviously. Today I wanted to focus on the second video that I'm doing in a new series that I'm calling One Outstanding Recording Studio, 5 Essential Albums. The first video that I did on this topic was the famous Townhouse Studios in London. Check it out if you haven't seen it. Today I'm going to kind of shine the light on Memphis, Tennessee. You know, Memphis is famous for, of course, Stax Studios. Also, Royal Studios is in Memphis. Royal is where Willie Mitchell is the main producer, was the main producer from that studio, and Al Green did all of his iconic run of albums in the 1970s at Royal Studios. Ike and Tina Turner have done some things there, all the way up to Bruno Mars, believe it or not. So those are just two studios. However, I'm going to be talking about a third iconic studio, and that's called Ardent Studios, based in Memphis. They started up in the mid-1960s, and I have 5 incredible albums I'm going to share with you today that were all parts of the albums were recorded and mixed there. In some cases, the entire albums were recorded and mixed at Ardent Studios. So Ardent Studios got its start in the mid-1960s. It was formed by a record producer by the name of John Fry. And John Fry had a colleague of his named Terry Manning. These were the two main guys behind Ardent Studios. Both now passed away. But Terry Manning particularly is known for some incredible record production work and very good, talented guy as far as mixing albums, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the first album I'm going to feature. So in 1970, you know, Led Zeppelin, they were in the middle of touring behind Led Zeppelin I and Led Zeppelin II. Their Atlantic Records wanted a third album out ASAP, and but you know, the demands of the first two albums were doing so well, particularly Led Zeppelin II. The band was basically doing nonstop touring, and they might get, you know, a 2-week, 3-week, maybe a month window to start working on new songs. So in the spring of 1970, Robert Plant and Jimmy Page booked, I think it was about a week stay at an old, you know, vacation cottage in the Welsh Highlands. And it was here that they started working out some ideas for new songs, which would eventually end up on Led Zeppelin III, which was released later in 1970. The kind of rural and pastoral setting of the cottage where Page and Plant were spending that kind of downtime kind of influenced the album that Led Zeppelin III would become. And, you know, famously, I think Jimmy Page has said in interviews that, you know, with Led Zeppelin III, the album, that's where the true sound of Led Zeppelin emerged. So Led Zeppelin III, as we all know, features a lot more folk-oriented music. There's plenty of electric blues as well, but really moving into folk and acoustic songs as well. After another short tour in the UK, I believe, the band went to another old kind of an English countryside mansion called Headley Grange. And if you guys haven't seen It Might Get Loud, that's the documentary that featured The Edge, Jimmy Page, and Jack White. It's pretty cool because there are some film sequences in that documentary where Jimmy Page is actually on location at Headley Grange, and he's showing some of the kind of the setups in different rooms, even a stairwell where parts of Led Zeppelin IV were recorded. So they returned to Headley Grange. I think they did parts of Houses of the Holy there as well. It was a countryside kind of mansion, and they had to bring in the Rolling Stones mobile recording truck to basically act as the recording apparatus infrastructure for the recording sessions. So they laid down a lot of the beginnings of songs, some full songs for Led Zeppelin III at that Headley Grange before they moved on to I think it was Olympic Studios in London, and did a lot of more production work, overdubs, more recording, before they were kind of out of time and had to go back on tour, this time to the United States. So what happened is Jimmy Page had a relationship with Terry Manning, and he knew about Ardent Studios in Memphis. And he decided he wanted to have Terry Manning work on the album as far as piecing everything together, working on overdubs. Different members of the band would actually fly in with Jimmy Page and their manager Peter Grant to Memphis, on off days during their tour, and kind of continued piecing together what would become Led Zeppelin III at Ardent Studios in Memphis. And Terry Manning completed the final mix of the album at Ardent Studios, and he was the one who actually inscribed on the lacquer, that famous bit of Aleister Crowley inspired verbiage that Jimmy Page came up with. So Terry Manning actually did that. It's pretty interesting. So anyway, that is this incredible album. I can't believe I forgot to show you guys what I was talking about. Anyway, that is Led Zeppelin III. I have a really nice original copy of this. It's got the moving dial with the die cut. Let's see if we can get this thing to move. There we go. Okay. Anyway. There's the band. And of course that inner sleeve. Led Zeppelin III, parts of this album were recorded and the final mix was completed at Ardent Studios in Memphis. Fantastic album. And like I mentioned earlier, this is where Led Zeppelin really kind of fleshed out their sound, adding a lot more acoustic and pastoral elements. In 1972, one of the most influential albums ever recorded as far as rock and roll is concerned was recorded at Ardent Studios. It was produced by John Fry. It was eventually issued on a label that Ardent Studios actually came up with, Ardent Records. And I'm talking about the #1 record is the name of the album. It's Big Star. This is a gorgeous Kraft Recordings re-release. It is one of the best sounding albums in my collection. Really, really well done. Go check it out. I think this could be out of print now, but Kraft Recordings reissued this a few years ago now. But just a gorgeous glossy cover. Heavy duty cardstock. There is the band. And if you're not familiar with Big Star, these guys were incredibly influential on Cheap Trick, R.E.M, the Posies, Big Head Todd and the Monsters, many other bands. And they're basically known as one of the initial prototypical power pop bands. And the band was featured Alex Chilton and Chris Bell. Those guys were heavily influenced by the Beatles. Chris Bell was an incredible arranger of songs and just a really interesting song architect. He came out with another kind of infamous album, I Am the Cosmos. Check that out if you haven't seen that before. Jody Stevens was on drums, and Chris Hummel was the bass player for the band. They were very, very short-lived. So Chris Bell left the band after this album, and Chilton kind of took up the reins, and eventually, about a year later, they came out with Radio City, which is another fantastic album. And then a few years down the line, I think 1978, Big Star released their third, and at that point, final album called Third, and they eventually disbanded. Now, in the mid-90s, there was a resurgence in the popularity of Big Star. Number one record and Radio City were released as a double album in the very, very late 70s, and then reissued on CD, I think in 1992. And I remember I bought that album. You know, you read all these articles in Rolling Stone and kind of learn about the history of music. And this band was heavily cited in interviews all the time. So I went and got that CD, I remember, and a lot of other people did. And that kind of spurred on a resurgence in the popularity, or the acknowledgement of even, or the discovery of Big Star. And the band reformed without Chris Bell, and they think they added a couple guys from the Posies to help out with fleshing out the sound, because there's a lot of intricate layering of music on the albums that they put out. This thing, you know, there are some iconic songs on here. One is the Alex Chilton song called 13. Another one, In the Streets, is amazing. This is almost a perfect album. If you've never heard this, you deserve to give this a shot. And look for the Craft Recordings reissue. That is number one record by Big Star, recorded and mixed, produced, mastered at Ardent Studios in Memphis. Billy Gibbons from ZZ Top heard Led Zeppelin III and was amazed at the soundscapes and just overall production value that was on that album, and he immediately kind of sought out Terry Manning in Memphis at Ardent, and worked with Terry Manning on Tres Hombres on the final mixdown of the album in Memphis. And he continued to work with Terry Manning all the way up to, I think Eliminator. But I'm going to focus today on Fandango. This is the kind of famous 1975 album from ZZ Top that featured, side one was a live side, and then side two featured studio cuts, and side two was recorded at Ardent Studios in Memphis, produced by Terry Manning. Now, this album, I'm going to put it out there that side two is one of the best sounding sides that ZZ Top ever released. Let me talk about some of the songs here. So we've got Nasty Dogs and Funky Kings, Blue Jean Blues, Balinese with Dusty Hill on lead vocals, Mexican Blackbird, Heard It on the X, and Tush. Of course, Tush also features Dusty on lead vocals. What an amazing song. Heard It on the X is one of the best ZZ Top songs, and it's they're talking about this radio station in Mexico that they could pick up in Texas and hear all the way from Texas. There is some just down and dirty ZZ Top classic American electric blues on this album, and it sounds amazing. This was mastered by Robert Ludwig, and it's one of my favorite ZZ Top albums. That's Fandango. Side 2, the studio side, was recorded, mixed, and produced at Ardent Studios in Memphis. In 1987, the Replacements were at a turning point in their career. You know, the famous alternative band from Minneapolis, Paul Westerberg, Tommy Stinson, Chris Mars, and Bob Stinson. What happened in 1987 is they got together in Minneapolis and started working on what would become their fifth album. And the recording sessions kind of broke down, and there were some obvious issues with Bob Stinson. So Bob Stinson was basically kind of pushed out of the band, very awkward because his brother is the bass player, right? But that happened, and then they decided to kind of regroup and decided to go down to Memphis to Ardent Studios. They, especially Paul Westerberg, they were heavily influenced by Big Star, and curiosity kind of killed the cat. They wanted to go down and check out Ardent Studios. They had lined up a producer named Jim Dickinson. Jim Dickinson is a world famous producer, now departed as well, but he worked with Ry Cooder on several of his albums and some other artists, and he was based out of Memphis. So they went down to Ardent Studios to work on the fifth album of the Replacements, Pleased to Meet Me. Jim Dickinson really reined in the band and had them try out different styles of music, different arrangements on different songs, brought in some Memphis horns and saxophone on various songs on this album, and really kind of changed up the Replacements' kind of shambolic sound for this album. Really cleaned them up, kind of made them ready for prime time. And this was the #1 selling album until the final two Replacements albums came along. But this really kind of set the stage for national prominence. There are some incredible songs on this album. Skyway is an acoustic Paul Westerberg masterpiece, and Can't Hardly Wait is just one of the iconic Replacement songs. It's the last song on side 2. Very, very up-tempo driving song. The second stanza of the song, these Memphis horns come in and basically kick the song into overdrive. This is a fantastic album. Also on Can't Hardly Wait, there is a gentleman there in the recording sessions who added some kind of guitar fills, and none other than Alex Chilton. There is a song titled Alex Chilton on side 1. That kind of tells you how important Alex Chilton was to Paul Westerberg. That is a great album. Pleased to Meet Me. This is a reissue I picked up a couple years ago. Kind of a cool cobalt blue. I love the inner sleeve on this album. Kind of shows you in all these black and white kind of Polaroids the fun that was being had in the studio. So produced by Jim Dickinson, this is Pleased to Meet Me, the fifth album, one of their best, by the Replacements, recorded at Ardent Studios in Memphis. In 1987, R.E.M. had come to the end of the road with IRS Records. They had completed their contractual commitments and started shopping around with all of the major labels. And in 1988, in the spring, they settled on Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers would be their label, I think, for the end of their recording days, all the way up to 2011, I think, when R.E.M. called it a day. The first album on the Warner label, of course, was the 1988 masterpiece, Green. And with this album, Michael Stipe told Bill Berry, Peter Buck, and Mike Mills that he didn't want them to write or arrange any songs that sounded like an R.E.M. song. So the guys kind of took that to heart, and they also switched up instrumentation on a lot of songs. You know, Peter Buck might play bass, Mike Mills might play lead guitar, and we got one of the most eclectic R.E.M. albums ever. And this thing just sounds amazing. This is also a master disc Bob Ludwig cut that I have in my hand, one of the originals pressings. It's got a custom label on it, really nice. There is some acoustic elements in here as well. My favorite side is side one. You've got Orange Crush, Turn You Inside Out. Turn You Inside Out almost has some Zeppelin-esque jams on it, as far as just kind of the overall punch of the song. Hair Shirt, I Remember California, and then there is an untitled song at the end of the album that's at the end of the side that's amazing as well. Each side of the album had its own title. Side 2 was titled Metal, and side 1 was titled Air. There was Pop Song 89 that led off the album. Not my most favorite R.E.M. song, but very, very up-tempo, pretty effective as far as a lead-off song is concerned. I love Get Up on side 1 as well. World Leader Pretend, The Wrong Child. There's a bit of political commentary in this album. Of course, Orange Crush, what an amazing song. That is Green with that custom orange label. That was released in 1988. They actually coincided. Michael Stipe wanted the album to drop on Election Day of 1988. Another very, very overt political move. And they had a fantastic tour behind that album. You know, it's the one where Michael Stipe had for the first time, had a bullhorn out with the crowd, and pretty amazing. You can find footage of that all over YouTube. Anyway, that was originally set up, and the original the first recording sessions for Green took place at Ardent. I think they finished up the album and mixed it at Bearsville Studios up near Woodstock, New York. But that is the fifth and final album I'm going to feature today that was recorded at Ardent Studios. So this was the second video in my series called, you know, Iconic Recording Studios, 5 Essential Albums. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and ladies. Please like and subscribe. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, I would really appreciate it. Check out the link to some cool channel-themed merch. Basically all kind of spotlighting my logo. Hope everybody has a great day. Take care.